Hi, this is Joshua Schaus doing this week's presentation for Crystal Sears public speaking class, and I'm going to be doing the demonstrative speech on guitars simply because I have a few around. We have to have props, we have to discuss the object at hand, so I'm going to be giving a quick and really basic overview of essentially the science behind making music with guitars. I won't go into any grave detail simply because it's 7 to 10 minutes long, and you can give a 7-minute presentation on just the basic major chords if you really wanted to stretch it out and go into detail. And I'd rather do a more broad overview that makes use of everything that I have here. So I'll get started with the absolute basics with the 6-string acoustic that I have right here. This is an Epiphone, which is a pretty common brand. I'm actually from the city of Kalamazoo, Michigan, where Gibson set up its first shop, and little fun fact, passed up the first solid body guitar. Fender took off with it, and they realized later they had made a major mistake. This is an acoustic, of course, which doesn't apply to that. I don't have an electric on hand, but I will discuss a little bit about what you can do with an electric that you can't do with an acoustic. This is your really basic 6-string acoustic. We have E, B, G, D, A, and E. Those are your strings. You can pluck an individual string, or you can do a full chord. There are 6 what they call cowboy chords, very basic, often used in your country western music. Then you have your minor chords that split off from those, which often can use a lot less strings on average. But like I said, there's a lot, and I could spend a lot of time talking about them, more time than was requested to devote to this presentation. But typically when you're building a song out of those chords, those minor chords, you're also going to implement single strings, and that is the basics of building music with your acoustic. There's also typically going to be a bass guitar involved. Right here I have your most standard, which is the 4-string. A lot of different bands, a lot of different musicians, they don't get too in depth with bass, so they'll just keep it to the 4 strings. You have your E, A, sorry, grab the 5-string. You have your E, A, and your D and G. Those are typically going to be your 4 strings on your bass. But then if you wanted, now I'll grab it. If you wanted, you could easily go with a 5-string, and none of this is set in stone. I've even seen guys who have like 12 or 14 string bass guitars, especially if they're in a jazz or a funk band, where you spend a lot more time working on it, working on your deeper tones. This 5-string right here is tuned downwards. There is no set notes attached to any strings on your 5-string bass, simply because the whole point of adding in a 5-string, the reason that I have a 5-string, is it gives you the ability to tune either up or down. I went down, you can also go up. I've seen, like Warwick for example, when I was looking at guitars that advertised a F-tuned 5-string bass guitar, which with the right amp can be off the wall, absolutely amazing. Not something that was in my price range. What I have here is an Ibanez Soundgear, which is a very common brand of bass guitar, especially when you're looking at the 5 strings. Typically when you're tuning downwards, and if you play with my style, which is a slap bass, you're looking at something like the band Korn, that rap metal, nu metal style, where they do a slap bass with a very, very deep tone. And with that, you're going to have to pull in a certain amp setup, a certain tuning, what we refer to as drop tuning, and it's of my preference, not everybody's, but with a lot of your jazz and your funk bands, you're looking at like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, they're going to spend a little more detail on bass guitars, and there's acoustics too, but you don't see very many of them. Not a lot of acoustic basses, and when you do, they're typically stand-ups, which also are a little pricey. Not as bad as like that Warwick, but they're a little more expensive. Now with the electric guitars, let's say that this acoustic right here was instead an electric, and you wouldn't just stop at like your cowboy chords and your minor chords and single strings. You can do what they call power chords, which will often consist of just 2 strings. That's where you're going to want to set in your higher distortion. Distortion's pretty prevalent when you're discussing electric guitars, more so than bass. When you're dealing with your typical 6-string electric, distortion is pretty much almost required in today's music. Not very many people go without it. Heavy distortion. When you're, at least in punk rock and metal and the kind of music that I'm into, obviously it's not so necessary if you're into your softer, older rock, but even the soft rock of today, distortion is absolutely necessary, and I don't have any pedals on hand, or I would get into that, but that was just an overview of all the different kind of guitars and the absolute basics. Whenever you are playing guitar, make sure that you tune it properly, and really, I mean, $15 for a Korg tuner, but I don't have one because I just use a smartphone. Just download the right app. I mean, I've got One Click Guitar Tuner. You can get not only the tuner, but fun little games to practice your dexterity, learn more about chords, learn more about everything really. I mean, the games are pretty all-encompassing. So, alright, thank you.